I just did a mini Euro trip and was shocked at what Paris is really like. What the fuck happened to Paris? Honestly, there's so many better places in France to visit. Paris is overrated and mega expensive because of the name value and not the most clean city either. I'd recommend Bordeaux, Nice, Rennes in France. Europe-wise there's so many places: Amsterdam, Berlin, Munich, Budapest, Krakow, Zagreb. I'm French. I'm from south of France and I moved to Paris 5 years ago to finish my studies and I still live in. My first years in Paris were really good. This is a really good city to visit. There is plenty museums, bars, activities everywhere. It's very dynamic, but over the years I realized that Paris is toxic. It's a dirty city with bad frequentations. As a woman I'm not feeling safe at night, and even during daytime. Parisians are awful people. I feel not at home here. I think Paris is overrated too. It's cool to visit, to live in for a couple of years, but I will never stay here. You have so many cities and regions in France that are really beautiful and interesting. I was attacked at the subway station in Paris. After a late night of drinking, my friend and I got off at our stop around 3 a.m. I was in heels, and as I was walking up the stairs, someone kicked my heel out from under me. I fell down half the stairs, stood up, and screamed, "What the fuck?" Around me stood like 5 guys with their hoods up. The guy who kicked me said, in English, "Go back to America, you fucking pig." Luckily my friend is a tall woman with a deep voice. She told them off in French, and then grabbed me to go up the escalator instead. The assholes then hit the emergency stop button on the escalator and knocked everyone down that was riding it, including us. Nobody said a fucking thing. They just stood up and started walking up the stopped escalator. Mind you, the station was packed with people. Not a single fucking person stepped in to help us. Overall I like Paris, but not sure I'd go back. Edit definitely got the time wrong. It was one of the last trains for the evening. Don't disagree with anyone. It probably was more like 1 a.m., but this happened 8 years ago, so forgive my memory. Yeah, my first time in Paris consisted of a lot of aggressive manhandling and stepping in human excrement within 15 minutes of leaving the bus station. I wasn't planning to visit, but was a day ahead of schedule, so figured why not? That was why not. I turned around and got the next bus to Marseille and booked a hotel room for the extra night. Edit, I'm not bothered by crime or rough areas. I wound up living around Marseille for a few years after and would 100% move back today despite it being dirty and a bit dangerous. Crime-ridden. It was honestly just gross and didn't seem worth it at that point. Paris is honestly so overrated. There's way more beautiful places to visit in France, where you don't have to deal with constant crowds and can enjoy both nature and have loads to do. I've been there a few times and never cared for it, although I do still want to visit for the catacombs, but that's about as good as it gets lol. I was there 10 years ago and this is exactly how Paris was then. So doesn't sound like anything happened to it. It's been like that. If I ever go to France I avoid Paris and go to the countryside. It's so much nicer and the people are nicer too. Yup, same experience as a French citizen. Paris is luxurious and shiny images mostly there thanks to the luxury industry and the Eiffel Tower, but honestly, there are so many places that are truly incredibly beautiful in France. I recommend going to Ardèche when you can travel. Very nice environment. You can go swim in the river or go kayaking. You can do canyoning as well. Very cool place. Got engaged to my wife 10 years ago in Paris and at the time, I thought it was up there with Rome for the most interesting and enjoyable European destination I'd seen. Sad to hear about its current state. What a waste. Where are you guys all hanging out? I was in Paris for the World Cup in 2019, my 6th visit, and it was beautiful and clean. I tried speaking my college French but everyone spoke to me in English. How TF did you get into France, especially Paris, when they've been in varying stages of lockdown for the past 6 months, and why would you go when it's in lockdown? I live in France and it's hard to get in even with a visa for the past 6-ish months. Paris has always been kind of a dump. Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell describes how trashy Paris is. The Louvre is also extremely overrated, unless you want to stand in line for hours and look at fakes and forgeries of famous paintings. You can spend your time better elsewhere. How did you manage to do a mini Euro trip during these times when everything is on lockdown and lots of borders are closed? It honestly feels pretty irresponsible to do something like this right now. Based on the description, it's probably like the equivalent of only coming to America to see Los Angeles or San Francisco. Literal piles of shit in the street and street beggars are common. But that's only a tiny portion of America. I did look up Paris on YouTube to see if I could get any recent walkthroughs. One video was a 3-hour showcase, with nothing but glowing reviews, and the other was literally called Paris is a shithole and full of people agreeing. Just like anything else, it seems broken down to political argument of what the left has supposedly done to Paris, versus what the right doesn't like seeing. We are really only interested in the catacombs, but I hear that's kind of a disappointment. Japan has an emergency number for when their citizens travel to Paris and end up in culture shock. Imagine living in an ultra-efficient /clean/modern city then traveling to Paris where everything is built on ancient catacombs. Yep, I went there in December 2016 near the beginning of my world trip and it was disappointing. The pickpocketers, the people living on the streets, the Syrian refugees, the sidewalks littered with immigrants selling zoomy light-up things you shoot into the sky, particularly around the Eiffel Tower, the clipboard scammers pretending to be deaf, etc., etc., plus all the other junk. My friend and I were somewhat well-traveled by this point, so when we took in Paris, we fucking hated it, and we still talk about it to this day. It was the worst place I'd been in the 20-plus countries I've been to. I constantly felt unsafe. As soon as we arrived, some guy tried a metro scam on us, that we had to give him like €500 for a train pass today because the metro would go up in price tomorrow. As soon as we told him to fuck off, some Bulgarian pickpockets stopped us in a train walkway between the ticket machine and the platform. They were doing weird shit like patting down our bags behind us. I just ended up getting vocal and loud and telling them to fuck off, and we pushed past to the platform. Not a great first experience. The only decent thing was when we went to a house party for cheese and wine, but everyone there was Canadian and I'm Aussie, so it was probably nice because it was just a disconnect from what was going on outside. How did you manage to do a mini Euro trip, my dude? Most of the continent is on lockdown. For example, I cannot leave my country without valid reason, healthcare, family emergency or work, otherwise is a 5k fine. It sounds like nothing has happened to Paris. Your description fits perfectly for when I was there in 1998 and 2007. People get his idea of a beautiful Paris from movies, but really, it's the dirtiest, most crime-filled, dangerous city in France. Also, I know the sewers are hundreds of years old, but no major city should smell like shit that much that often. It's funny reading posts like this because I had the exact opposite reaction to Paris. Was there in February 2019. I've done small amounts of travel within Europe, Athens and some Greek islands, Florence, Pisa, Barcelona, and Dublin, but traveled extensively in the United States and absolutely love the city. Maybe it's because I can't get enough of New Orleans, but Paris exceeded every single expectation I had set for it. The architecture, the museums, the people, and the food were all great. Maybe it's because I had my expectations set so low from people making comments like this about the city, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time there and cannot wait to go back. I am a white man from a large American city, Chicago, so I think those factors may play a part in my experience there as well. I traveled there with my now fiancé and we got around almost exclusively on the metro and had no issues. I would have considered the Paris metro more clean and safe than the subway in Chicago. We stayed at an Airbnb about a 5-minute walk from Place de la Republique and had no issues walking around at 2 a.m. I think it's possible to have bad experiences in cities and that can easily influence what you think of it. I mean, when I was 13 I was walking around downtown Atlanta by myself just taking in the city. I didn't love it, but it's a city and has some neat attractions. The next day I went to a McDonald's with my mom and the place got held up by some dudes with guns and I'm not sure if they murdered 2 people. But when the group left there were 2 people on the floor of the McDonald's completely unconscious in a pool of blood. No shots fired but they definitely got stabbed a few times. I've gone back to Atlanta a few times since then and I still don't love the city and I think there's way more interesting places to go in the US. But that one experience definitely skewed my view of the city a bit. But I just had to realize that these things happen and that doesn't define the city. Maybe I'm a sucker for grimy cities. You know I love you, Nola. Either way, I'm sorry you had a bad experience there. I'm just waiting for the day I can get vaccinated and eventually see more of Europe and the US. Again, I was supposed to be in Amsterdam and London in October. But oh well, hopefully I'll be able to see more of Europe soon. Traveling around Europe during a pandemic was your first mistake. Who expects things to be nice and interesting when people are confined and mostly miserable because they lost their job or loved ones, while fun places are closed? You mentioned Rio in your comments. If you were to compare Brazil in 2019 and now, you'd have a completely different experience. I moved here a couple of years ago for the fun nights, the great beaches and the amazing people. Neither of those I got to enjoy lately. The streets seem dead and the people are down where I live. It's been quite sad but understandably so. What happened was in the mid-1990s the French government started to freak out about how French people weren't making enough babies and so they concluded the only logical solution was to drastically lower the standards of who they would let into the country. Also there were several advised wars against Northern Africa and the Middle East that dramatically increased the number of refugees. That said, Paris was never clean but it was not like you said. Paris was an absolute shithole of a place back in the early 90s and has grown progressively worse. Try the south of France, Grasse, Saint Raphael, anywhere along the Côte d'Azur. It's beautiful. Spent 10 weeks of every year then when I was younger, due to school teacher father with lots of time off and holiday chalet. Also Normandy and Brittany are also lovely but cold. Barfleur is charming and the WW2 history in that region is fascinating. Get the hell out of Calais as fast as you can though. Taking immigrants is a huge responsibility, both towards them and to the resident population. European politicians have failed tremendously, far more concerned in importing cheap labor under the guise of wokeness than being responsible policymakers. What happened to Paris is a symptom of that. Opening your door and letting a lot of people in might be easy, but good luck kicking them out. French male here. Lived in Paris and its suburb for 14 years, got attacked or robbed around 12 times, at knife point and gunpoint, but most of the time just a bunch of guys. Nobody ever moved a finger while watching what was happening. All my friends/family/girlfriends were attacked at least once. Police told one of my girlfriend who was robbed of her phone that the beating on her face were not really serious. The police is one of the worst in Europe. They will basically treat everyone like shit in a condescending manner. Well, about the cleanliness of the city, it's always been dirty with pee smell, dogs poop and the like. I left France 15 years ago to live in Asia and never looked back. Here I can go to drink and do whatever I want to do all night long and never had a problem. If a thug attacks anyone, people will rush in to beat the shit out of him. Civilized, developed countries, my ass. I see so many posts like this and have heard many people say this. It genuinely confuses me. My family went to Paris in 2018 for several days and we never once encountered a panhandler, there wasn't much looter, and we didn't have a single weird or disturbing incident. All the restaurants we visited, the waitresses spoke English for the most part. I thought it was beautiful and we all had an amazing time. Maybe we just came at just the right time. It's been like that for decades and the reason people visit is because the Paris they see exists only on the Universal Backlot Tour. That said, my favorite part of Paris was the museums. Per capita, I don't think there's a city I visited in Europe that had more museums in such a radius. Downside, of course, everything in French but still beautiful. My husband's family lives in Courbevoie, so I'm happy I got to visit and see things, but on this next visit post-COVID the only thing I think we'll do is get a photo of the baby in front of the Eiffel for a scrapbook and just visit the family more than anything. Dude, Paris has always been like that. I went there as a kid in the late 90s and I remember my aunt complaining about how filthy it was and how nothing was as she expected it to be. Lol. She thought everyone would be a model wearing fashionable clothing. They were not. They were rude and everyone and their grandma was a smoker. 100% agree. I went in December of 2019 and felt the same way. I was so disappointed. It was my first time being in Paris. I was harassed by a group of men as while there, he was trying to make me kiss him on the cheek, so I understand this. Majorly disappointed. The Eiffel Tower area was filthy as well as most of the city. Maybe I romanticized Paris too much, but it was a huge letdown. We have a friend who was born in Paris. She hates it now and is terrified of walking down streets by herself. She says it's always immigrants looking for work. She's not being racist as these are the only people who harass her on a daily basis. Paris is the worst place to go. The worst thing about Paris is the waiters. Lol. Go to Arles or Montpellier. France is a wonderful country, so is the UK, but you wouldn't go to Luton for tourism. London it's still great though. Sorry Luton, I still love you. Paris derangement syndrome is real. People think they'll see a neat little city with bistros on every corner. Everyone is stylish and elegant, and that they'll get to see the pinnacle of high society. Then they realize it's a filthy, expensive shithole. Been there, done that. Sorry to hear I was there summer of 2019 and didn't have any issues, but it's the world's #1 tourist destination. Very crowded and people have been very unhappy with the pandemic and many have left the city for the suburbs due to lockdowns. I bought some nice expensive formal leather boots in Paris because, why not? I decided to wear them out of the store and it was only then I realized how much dog shit is everywhere. I was hyper aware because of the new clean boots on my feet, but yeah, the place was a minefield of dog doo. I visited Paris in 2019 with my dad and his girlfriend. I couldn't stay as long as they could and took the train to the airport by myself. I got lost trying to find the train and asked the man which train to the airport. Big mistake. He clearly didn't need to take that train, but he got on with me and proceeded to ask me if I was alone, where I was from, asking for my number, to connect on Facebook/WhatsApp. Some really personal questions about my age. etc. I got a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew he wasn't just trying to flirt. I immediately remembered my mom telling me about finding another group of women and pretending like you know them. I spotted a lady by herself in another car and told him I saw my friend and left him to go sit with her. Acted like I knew her and quietly told her the situation. He eventually got off before the train reached the airport and I got on my plane. Arrived home without any issues. I was terrified and I'm convinced he was a sex trafficker and was trying to gauge how difficult I would be to take. I don't think I'll ever go back to Paris again, not just because of this situation, but because even with my dad with me the men were disgustingly bold and attempting to flirt with me or catcall me. Trash was everywhere and it is not the city of love people think it is. I did not enjoy my time there. Took a train ride from Switzerland through France to UK at the start of last year, changing in Paris. The road outside Gare de Lyon is lined with bin bags leaking, rats, filth, and I kept being stopped by people waiting for enough people to be out of sight to try and take my bags by trying to hold conversation and directing my attention. Was an experience.